this on, and then we'll start with the entire screen. Hopefully it will accommodate us. Fabulous. Huzzah.
Yeah. Dude, he's prepped for this.
Hello, my folks, and welcome to today's episode, a very lecture-y episode of Ancient Medicine. But it's been a minute, so I think hopefully it'll be fun, and if it's not, I'm sorry. I want to orient us to where we are in the course, in part because I'm going to make a few judicious edits because we lost so much time at the beginning of the class, and then I was barfing. So, we have currently finished Unit 5, which is this one. So the day that I was sick, you watched this makeup lecture. We're going to finish that lecture file today and start a new one about Greek-style medicine coming to ancient Rome. But for this unit, if you have not already, watch the video. There's von Staden's article about Herophilus and Erasistratus. And then Nicander of Colophon's Alexi Pharmaca is a poem about poison that you read for our activity last class. So that's orienting us in time. As of last class, we finished this unit, and we are about to start a slightly slimmer unit here, Greek medicine in Rome, which is exactly what it looks like. Greek-speaking physicians are going to come to Rome, and it's going to be interesting. The two readings for this section are Cato the Elder's on Agriculture, which is a manual on how to run your plantation. But in it, he has some medical advice. The medical advice involves a lot of cabbage. We are not entirely sure if Cato wrote the cabbage bit or the cabbage bit just got added in later. We have questions about the cabbage, but for the purpose of this class, Cato's the cabbage guy. It makes him very memorable, and you'll see why. I dare you to come up with more creative uses for cabbage. I'm also having you read my translation of Pliny the Elder's beginning to Book 29. This is Book 29 of 37 in his 37-volume work on natural sciences as of 79 CE. So we'll meet him later today. I really kind of love him, even though he is very much that Roman uncle at Thanksgiving with some problematic takes, but he's sweet. Let me have my problematic favorite. So, your two readings. Cato, I don't actually like him very much. And then there's Pliny the Elder, I like him more. You're reading them both. Both of them are going to talk about why you don't need to spend as much money as you think you do on medicine and why healthcare is overpriced. Relatable. So, we are going to begin and hopefully finish the contents of these two lectures associated with these two readings. Moving ahead, there was a unit where we talked about Roman malpractice law. I have cut this, which just hurts my heart a little bit because I'm writing a book about this. This is the core of my expertise. But if you're interested, it's still there. You can still do it for funsies. And if you find yourself intrigued, I just this semester have offered my first run of Roman law as a standalone class. It's gone well. It'll likely come up again. So if you are interested in Roman law, I can give you some Roman law, just not in this class. So then we are going to also meet Galen, which is going to finish out our historical survey of the best of ancient medicine. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. Are we recording? Yes, we're still recording. Okay, great. I don't want to turn this off and risk messing it up. So I will set us up where the last lecture y'all watched ended, and then back to here, and nobody wants to look at box drive computer. Yes. Okay, fine. Cool. It seems to be working. So, briefly, attendance. Shout if you're here. Presley.
Here.
Fantastic. Mohammed.
Yeah.
Yay. Megan.
Yeah.
Lovely. Abby. Not yet. Kennedy.
Here.
Yay. Uthman.
Here.
Great. Maya.
Here.
Lovely. Phoebe.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, yes. I saw you. Key.
Here.
Great. You moved, but I still found you. Kevin. No Kevins. Carola, sorry. No Carola. Rachel.
Here.
Fantastic. Matthew.
Here.
Matthew. Janali.
Here.
Great. Halima.
Here.
Great. Kristen. No. Not yet. Well, that's annoying. Oh, Kristen, you're here. Oh, no.
I thought you said mine.
Oh, no, I did, but not you, Maya. Other Maya. You're coming. Benedict.
Here.
Great. Kang? Nope. Grayson?
Here.
Sweet. Maddie?
Here.
Fabulous. Kimberly?
Here.
Great. Maya is here. And Janicia? Hello. Sangalie? No. Lulia? No. Finn?
Here.
Great. Shreya? No Shreyas. Abby? No Abby's. Zeta?
Here.
Zeta. Surya?
Here.
Great. And Solomon?
Here.
Wonderful. Lacey?
Here.
Lovely. Alec?
Here.
Alec, welcome back. Will? Hi, Will. And Fatma? No Fatma. Tanya? Tanya. Ryan?
Here.
Great. Alexander?
Here.
Groovy. And Emily?
Here.
Great. I miss anyone? All right, here we go. So to briefly check in, this is the last slide of the recorded lecture that was assigned for my sick day. And this is the point at which we start to see more divisions and factionalism amongst rationalizing physicians as they begin to commit to different models of how they think the human body works. This is just broad strokes. The full thing is on the lecture. I'm not going to belabor this, but these two groups that emerge from the Hippocratic tradition are dogmatics, which sounds more judgmental for modern ears than it does for them. These are folks who focus on dogma or received teaching. So these theories about what the humors are, that the humors are indeed clinically significant, and they are the best ways to understand the body. Empiricists are a contrarian movement that reacts to the dogmatic insistence on humors and theoretical hidden causes for disease. Real quickly, let's go over what's the difference between a hidden cause of disease and an evident cause of disease. Yay, let's go over this. Okay. So a patient comes in and they've got a high fever. They say there's burning in their abdomen. They're like doubled over, burning. If your conclusion is that they've got way too much yellow bile in their stomach, are we hypothesizing a hidden cause for that disease or an evident cause, an observable cause? Hidden, right. Because you have a lot of evidence, but you can't you can cut your patient open and look, but that's going to cause you some issues. So dogmatics are really big on using circumstantial evidence to figure out hidden causes of diseases, these theoretical, often humor-based ideas about what's going on inside a body to cause symptoms outside and subjectively for the patient. Empiricists push back on this a bit. They say, look, if you can't see the yellow bile, then you can't see the yellow bile. You can't just make up an unseen cause for a disease. Like, it doesn't count unless you can see it. So that's what they mean by an evident cause. So for instance, a patient comes in, they're having a burning sensation, they're doubled over, they're in pain, and there is a wooden stake shoved through their sternum. Hidden or evident cause? Evident. It's this. They've been staked. It's a vampire hunter, probably. That's an evident cause of disease. But it can be a bit more obvious. So you come in with a cold, and there is just snot. So much snot coming out your nose. Saying somebody has way too much phlegm in their nasal cavity, evident or hidden cause, do we think? Evident, yeah, because you can see the snot. And here is where this becomes a bit of a spectrum. Some doctors are more willing to make leaps of logic than others. This just is a convenient spectrum for doctors to place themselves on. Empirics, absent a theoretical humor balance framework for thinking about disease, go for what they call a tripod, or the three-legged stool of how we approach medicine. And briefly, the tripod's here in the middle. This is the important bit. So leg number one is observation, both what you see and what the patient sees, experiences, and communicates to you. So they're really invested in creating a clear language and method for tracking stuff we can't observe with precision. So that's number one. Leg number two is history. And this is both the patient's history in the sense that we're used to it in modern medicine, but also the sum total of people's experience with medical problems up to this date. So what other cases have you seen before? Is this like or unlike those other cases? Being well read and having had a lot of clinical hours is this next leg. So real clear observation, leg number one of the tripod stool. Leg number two, personal experience, reading your literature. Pretty good leg to have on your stool. Third leg of the stool is analogy. And this is less a body of knowledge and more of a method. So this is making very clear comparisons and contrasts between the new thing that your patient is doing and history. So taking the two legs, observation and history, and then making very careful comparisons, making sure that you're putting like with like, and you're not just jumping to conclusions. A lot about the tripod is an important beta version of what ends up being the scientific method. So it's not the scientific method as we understand it, but it's a really important step in the history of science towards filtering out what we now know as confirmation bias, right? When you go in thinking, oh, I know what that is, it's phlegm. This stops you and gets you to think about it a little bit. Also, these two schools seem to be quite divided about how to read the Hippocratic corpus, with dogmatics leaning into, well, he talked about humors, so the humors are real. And empiricists being like, okay, so the content of what the Hippocratic authors are doing, we don't necessarily think that everything was correct, but you need to look at the spirit, right? He's an observer, he's curious, he's a scientist. We should be like the authors in the Hippocratic corpus, but do our own work. They're both right and they're both wrong. And they argue with each other a lot. So, here we're going to move into the slightly new information. And this is going to be a bit of world building to help flesh out what we were doing during our last class assignment, where I had some of you pretending to be part of royal courts in the 3rd century BCE. So we are looking here at a map of the northeastern Mediterranean. So Italy is here, this is mainland Greece. This is half of what's now modern Turkey, the Anatolian Peninsula. this is only part of the world that was created in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquest of the Persian Empire. So, with the fall of the Persian Empire to Greek speakers and the subsequent reorganization of these places under Alexander's various generals, Alexander dies young, his generals carve up bits of the empire pie, and then fight over it for the next several hundred years. Rome shows up eventually, is what happens to this. One of the many ways that they compete with each other for superiority, bragging rights, credit, political power, is by trying to attract the highest profile scientists to live in their royal court and to be court intellectuals, which is why this is important to a history of medicine. We're not going to get too much into the politics, but it's important to know that for authors who are writing during this period, what we call the Hellenistic period, if you are high profile enough or you're aspirationally high profile, one of the big career questions that's going to come up in your life is, which monarch am I going to work for? And how much am I going to regret that decision later? For instance, Nicander of Colophon, I think, do I have this on the next page? No, I don't. So Colophon is right here. This is currently on the south coast of modern day Turkey. So this is in antiquity a Greek speaking region that has Greek speakers living next to local Lydian speakers. At this point, it's under the Seleucid Empire, which is not the same as this breakaway kingdom to the north. So this is the kingdom of Pergamum. The kingdom of Pergamum breaks away from the Seleucid Empire, and its kings, all of them named Attalus, rule this mini empire. Like, size doesn't matter, but this is it's tiny, it's sweet. I'm sounding very insulting there, like I'm very fond of Pergamum, full disclosure. So Pergamum, the city, is right here, and its territory does not include Colophon. Colophon explicitly is excluded. So Nicander is born in territory owned by the Seleucid kings. They're the empire that takes the Persian heartland and large portions of the Levant. However, as he becomes increasingly famous as both a doctor and a poet, he's recruited to go to the court of Pergamon, where King Attalus supports his research. So when he wrote the Thyriaca and Alexipharmaca, he was living inside the royal court, acting as a court poet. The king was paying his bills so he could do his science, poetry, outreach stuff. And this was the situation for most, but not all of Nicander's life, because Attalus III made some interesting choices in his will, allegedly. There was a lot of arguing about this will, because in his will, he left his country not to his kids, but to Rome, that Rome, the one in Italy, Rome, which is an interesting choice. What we think he was going for, and it's a little hard to tell because Rome subsequently becomes Rome, and they're very proud of this. According to Rome, it's because Rome was just that awesome. Other theories may be that Attalus didn't like any of his heirs and was like, screw you guys, I'm giving my kingdom to Rome. Maybe there was increasing political pressure as Rome became more and more of a financial and military force in the region, so he felt that the best thing for Pergamon was to spare them the inevitable war of conquest by just giving the kingdom to Rome in his will, thus facilitating what he hoped would be a bloodless transfer. It was not bloodless, but it was a transfer. So Rome ends up owning Pergamum, and Nicander dies, we are fairly sure, and again, we don't have a ton of biographical information, but we think he spends his last year living in the city of Rome because, he came with the country, I guess. What else do I want to say about this? Now, I think we unpacked this pretty well in our discussion sections, But something to think about, particularly with Nicander, is what kind of science do you do when your research agendas are structured by the government who pays your bills? And lest you think that this is an academic question with no real world value, we are currently in a moment where the institution that hires you to be a professor in their institution and their political leanings has everything to do with the kind of science you can practice. Similarly, the people who give you your grants have a lot to do with the kind of science that you're paid to do and what your culture values and considers scientifically important, which is not just shots fired at anything, but it's kind of interesting how many things change and how many things stay the same, ain't it? Yes. So bonus pictures of Pergamon. This is a reconstruction of what ancient Pergamon looked like. There was a huge complex temple to Asclepius, also royal palace. It was a beautiful high budget city. And I'm not showing you pictures of, well, here is what modern Pergamon looks like right now. The Germans got to it in the 18 and 1900s and took large portions of Pergamon back to Berlin, where it is now in a museum. So if you want to see Pergamon, you go to Berlin, but also Turkey. There's still some stuff left, but again, blame the Germans. It's not always the British Museum, but it's the British Museum a lot. Not this time, though. At any rate, Pergamon is close enough to the coast that it's very well connected with these seafaring trade routes, but it's also up on a highland inland, so it's pretty well protected. Neat city-state. Okay, so let's talk about some other royal courts that will show up as well when we're talking about scientific research in the Hellenistic period. Next on my list, a bit of a rogues gallery here, is Mithridates VI of Pontus, who was so associated with sponsoring research into toxicology that one of his biographies, one that I have some methodological issues with Adrienne Mayer's biography, which we need not get into. I do like Adrienne. Adrienne's fine, but at any rate, she calls her biography of this guy the Poison King. And I object not because he was into poison research, but everybody was. Like, he's not special. He's just about as obsessed with poison as every other Hellenistic monarch, which is to say a lot. But he is helped along its way. So the kingdom of Pontus is here. So this is the Anatolian Peninsula, modern-day Turkey. This is the Black Sea. Black Sea is what we call it today. Ancient word for this is Pontus Euxinus, which means the pleasant sea. It's full of storms. Look, I'm not coming for the Black Sea. It's a beautiful sea, but it is not safe. Please don't navigate unless you know what you're doing. Kingdom of Pontus begins here, expands and contracts during the course of Mithridates' reign. Mithridates himself is an interesting character. He is part of this network of kings that speak Greek and interact with this post-Alexander Greek kingdom community. However, he himself does not identify as Greek culturally. It's a language he spoke, but not the first language. This later becomes folded into the ancient kingdom of Armenia. It's the modern state of Georgia, not Georgia, United States, other Georgia. Very different, always specified. So Mithridates is in a region that was already well known for its trade in poisonous and pharmaceutically powerful botanicals. Primary among which was one substance named after the place where it was most commonly found and where the plant species were the most toxic version of themselves. That is, let's see if I can find it here, Aconus, which I think is about here. Is that? Oh, no, sorry, that's Aconus. So Aconus is the city, aconite is the plant that is found in that city. Does anybody remember aconite from last class? Yes. Aconite. How poisonous? Very. Its other nicknames are wolfsbane. By the way, just this is my note to all paranormal authors. Wolfsbane will kill everybody, not just werewolves. And it's not a substance that is harmless to people and fine for and deadly to werewolves. Also, you will kill people who are not werewolves. It is not okay to kill werewolves. Also, werewolves are people. That's why? Why are you like this? Anyway, wolfsbane, likewise, is not a psychoactive drug for werewolves that is harmless for humans. That is, it's a real plant. Real plants are real plants, and real plants exist for a reason, and you should be responsible before you just go putting shit in your young adult novels. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's so true.
But right? So please, kids, don't do wolfsbane. Don't do it. It will kill you. It's real. It's a real plant that will actually hurt you.
Is this like a Twilight rant or?
It's not just Twilight. I may have read a lot of Kindle Unlimited paranormal books in my time, and it breaks my brain a little bit every single time. So it's not just Twilight, but I think Twilight's one of the offenders. It shows up briefly in the franchise that shall not be named.
Okay.
Its other name is Monkshood. And Miss Granger identifies it correctly, but we don't imply that it's harmless, so there's that at least. My point here is that if you want to get the most deadly version of this plant, and also the original recipe, you get it from Aconus. And this is the spot that is doing most of the shipping to foreign markets. So what legitimate reason would you have for selling this incredibly toxic plant? Well, some of the clue is in the name wolfsbane. It was put into meat traps to kill predatory animals who were messing with your flocks. Please don't do that. That's not... Wolves deserve better. Wolves are good for the environment. Just wire people. But at any rate, some people don't like to be eaten by wolves, and they will do that, I guess. There is, in some periods, it gets used topically because it does cause a numbing sensation on contact. It's just that if you accidentally lick it, the hazard outweighs the icy hot effects. So maybe don't use this for sore muscle rubs. But it does cause numbing on contact, so occasionally it gets used as a topical anesthetic. Bad idea, don't. There are other substances too, though, that were grown in particularly strong varieties, and if you wanted to get the best version of it, you would order them from the Kingdom of Pontus. Opium poppies is another one. Mandrake, which is another one that often paranormal fantasy gets very, very wrong, because it will make you high. Just because it's a plant doesn't mean it's not going to do. But please don't recreationally do mandrake. It is also dangerous. You can die. I have not done mandrake myself. I'm just putting that out there. But at any rate, these in the ancient world were the best quality anesthetics, and to buy them from Pontus was to get them in a form where you would have the most certainty about your dosing. In an era before chemistry as we know it and the ability to standardize active ingredients in pharmacy, being able to get reliably strong versions of your favorite pharmaceutical plants is a really big deal. And this is part of what made Pontus so gosh darn wealthy. Also, they had gold mines. So, good for them. Unfortunately, they had gold mines, and they exist in the same universe as Rome, which is where this is going. Mithridates has the dubious but somewhat cool distinction of going to war with Rome twice. And twice because he lived through the first time he went to war with Rome, and they were like, go away, don't do it again. And then he did it again. but I understand his reasons. I have some sympathy for the guy. Here he is wearing a lion skin on his head. He is cosplaying, and he's following in the steps of Alexander the Great with this cosplay. So Alexander the Great would dress up like Heracles in order to make a point about himself being quasi-divine and also an explorer. So if you were a kingdom following in the wake of Alexander, one of the legitimate choices you might make when putting together a royal portrait is to dress up like Heracles. And here's our guy dressing up like Heracles. So we are interested in him in this class for a bit of drama that happened with a controversial hire that Mithridates tried and failed to make. And this is our next character, whose name you will have to remember, Asclepiades of Bithynia. So his name Asclepiades means descendant of Asclepius, so the Asclep thing, god of healing, which is a very convenient name for the fellow. He started out his life not as a doctor, but as a rhetorician. And his career as a teacher of rhetoric was going okay. But then he decided to multi-class a little bit and to concentrate on medicine. And he came up with an approach to healing that was neither dogmatism nor empiricism. It was a new way of thinking about the human body, and one that eventually develops into a third, what we call school or sect of medicine, a third model for how the human body works. But mid-career, there was a bit of a fight amongst various city-states on who got to invite Asclepiades to go live with them and do his scholarship. And this came down to a fight between Mithridates VI of Pontus, who had already gone to war with Rome once, and Rome. Yeah. So this fight got very nasty, and eventually Asclepiades, in a surprise move, decides not to move in with Mithridates, but to move to Rome. And this is something that Rome just never lets us forget about. They brag about this for centuries to come. And eventually they go to war with Mithridates a second time, at which point they hunt him down and coerce him into a situation where he ends his own life rather than be captured by Rome. And I do not blame him. It is built into Rome's endgame when they go to war with you. A few notes, though, about the story of Mithridates and his end, because this story, whether it is real or not, and we have a lot of questions about how real this is going to be very influential to the way that ancient people and medieval people and some modern people think about toxicology and the world of antidotes. So, according to legend, Mithridates VI used his many specialists in pharmacy research and toxicology research to come up with a foolproof plan for making himself immune to poison. It went like this. He would eat a little bit of every poison every day in like small amounts and slowly build up his immunity to poisons, the iocane powder approach to poisons. If you know, you know. If you don't, Princess Bride is a wonderful movie and you should treat yourself during spring break. Also, though, this legend has so many legs. He fed poison to ducks in his duck pond and then would drink the duck's blood. And drinking the poisoned duck blood would also then give him extra immunity to poisons. And so they eat the poisons himself, there's drink the duck blood poison. And then he also came up with the recipe for a universal antidote that had every antidote ingredient known to man in a precise proportion of each antidote to the other antidotes. And they're different recipes floating around for this in antiquity. Whether any of them are genuine is impossible to say. Probably a lot of them are just celebrity physicians cashing in on this story. But again, according to legend, he comes up with this perfect recipe for the universal antidote. And he calls this antidote Mithridatium, because his name is Mithridates, so Mithridatium. And after his death, drug formulations under the name Mithridatium start getting passed around and sold by doctors for obscene amounts of money. Yeah.
How did he die?
Great question. So here is what solidifies the legend. So let's take for a moment that he has figured out how to immunize himself to poison. He has the universal antidote. He is so good at poisons that it is the Second Mithridatic War. Pompey the Great has hunted him into a corner. He's had to leave his country. He is out of friends. He is stuck. And he's in a position where if the Romans kidnap him, they are going to execute him publicly and in the most humiliating way possible. So in this situation, he decides that he's going to end his own life, so Rome won't do it for him. This isn't... I don't like using suicide for this because this is not suicide, this is coercion. It's different. Anyway, he tries to take poison and fails because it worked. It worked too well. And again, like, this is exactly the kind of story I would make up if I were a Roman being like, Mithridates, screw you. So we must be very careful with this story. Also, I'm not sure this is how poison works, but nevertheless, he tries and fails to poison himself, so he has to get one of his bros to stab him. However, when people went for a great name for their universal antidote, something that sounds like it'll work, Mithridatium is the word they choose. So in Pliny the Elder, you're going to see when he's complaining about why doctors cost so much these days, he'll complain that, oh my God, so for Mithridatium, this universal antidote, there are like 62 ingredients in tiny, ridiculous proportions where it's like 1/8 part of this to 1/16 part of that, and it's just an utterly improbably stupid recipe that costs way too much. Doctors are clearly just cheating us for money. Pliny does kind of have a point there. So antidotes, universal antidotes, both under the brand name isn't quite it because anybody could call their antidote Mithridatium, but antidotes under the name of Mithridatium continue to circulate well into the Renaissance. But also you have a generic term for this kind of medication, which is theriac. So Mithridatium is if you want to make it sound like Mithridates. Theriac is like the generic brand of the same thing. So a theriac is a universal antidote. It's meant to be an antidote to whatever it is you took. That is just a mashup of all of the antidotes in one pill. There are some problems with this as a concept, starting with the antidote to everything is not necessarily like the poison that you take. You can have antidotes to a specific poison, but not all poisons poison you the same way. And not all cures cure you in the same way. So it is, if you take the wrong antidote, you could be double poisoning yourself with something else. You have to know what you're doing. So like the one-stop shop lozenge probably is not a thing that would help. A lot of the recipes, though, have stuff in them that would have made them attractive for wealthy people to buy and take. For instance, most of the recipes involve a large amount of opium. So this is not bad toxicology. Not all, but some things you can be poisoned with. You can slow your metabolism a bit with opiates, and it can also block some of the receptors that would normally worsen a poison reaction to some toxins. But again, not others. And if you're poisoned with opium, taking more opium is not going to help. However, Narcan is a great idea. And if you can get a hold of some, just keep it around. Save lives. It's important. However, there is no ancient Narcan. That's unfortunate. So that is two of our examples of friendly kings who invested heavily in science. And at this point, we're going to have to talk a little bit more about the Romans. So, Romans are a people of the Mediterranean who originate in central Italy and who begin to take over more and more bits of the Mediterranean as we move into the late Hellenistic period. Here is our over time spectrum. Our light yellows are as we approach the year zero. Actually, there isn't a year zero. Year zero into the first century CE. But in the early stages, so when we're in 300s moving up to the 200s, Rome is still mostly an Italian presence, a little bit of southern Spain. However, they are one of the largest city-states in the area. That is, they are a city that is also running a state. The city is Rome, and the city government of Rome is running everything in the increasingly orangey yellow bits. When Rome encounters more established, more long running, often Greek speaking states in the Eastern Mediterranean, they have some choices to make about how much they want to imitate the kinds of political and scientific structures going on in the places that they are encountering and taking over. One of these questions is, hey, should we get some scientists to move to our city? Because they've got scientists. Maybe we should have scientists. Some Romans are like, no, that is a waste of time. Other Romans are like, wait a minute. They call us barbarians. They think that we are losery barbarians who are uncultured. One of the things we can do about that is get some scientists of our very own. There are also some Romans who are like, we should all learn Greek. And other Romans who are like, no, screw it. We're Romans, we speak Latin. And that's controversial for a couple hundred years. A spoiler, Latin wins. Latin is fun. If you want to take either Latin or Greek, the Ancient Studies Department offers both, and you should because they're fun. Ancient languages are super fun. So, who are the Romans? They are linguistically different from Greek speakers, and this is really important to Greeks. And thus far, the scientists that we've been reading are Greek speakers writing in Greek. One of the features of Greek identity is that it's not so much tied to where you live, but what language you speak, what religious customs you participate in, and how you identify with other Greek communities and customs. They had a word for people who do not speak Greek, and it was a very judgmental word, and it was barbarian. Barbarian means nothing on its own. It is a super offensive term for people who don't speak Greek, if you are a Greek speaker. This is something that you will see. So it's in the Pliny the Elder reading, but Pliny the Elder quotes an otherwise lost work of Cato the Elder. And it's Cato the Elder who says, Greeks are the snottiest, worst people ever. They call us opakoi and barbarians, and they think that we are less than shit because we don't speak Greek, and I don't like that. And I don't agree with Cato the Elder often, but I get it. It really sucks when people write off you and your culture because it's not theirs. That is, by definition, a really biased and shitty way to move through the world. Back then, to our Romans then, they're in a world that hears their language and doesn't recognize it as the civilized language, as Greek. However, Romans consider themselves plenty civilized. They have literature, they have language, they have rhetoric, and they're also in charge of increasing bits of the Mediterranean. One could argue that Romans feel they have a lot to prove and it made them a bit violent. I'm sounding very judgy about the Romans at the moment, aren't I? Nonetheless, like other... No, we'll go for the patriarchy next. They are a patriarchal society in this way, because not all patriarchies are made the same. Their smallest unit of the state is the household, and the household is organized with the eldest male head of household in charge. They call this person the pater familias, or the father head of the family. And within the family, the father's word is law. He's in charge of who marries whom, what do we do with the money, the normal things. But he is also the point of contact between the household and the state. And this partnership between the family and the state is particularly tight in Rome, in that one of the ways that you can get citizenship in Rome, and this is unusual in other cultures across the Mediterranean, is that if the male head of household grants you freedom, so you're enslaved, manumitted, you are treated like an adopted child of that family for legal purposes. Your Roman name is now the name of your most recent enslaver, and you're still considered under their protection or under their sponsorship. What this means is that Roman citizenship is one of the more open systems of citizenship in the Mediterranean. Note, I'm not advocating that we should make citizenship work this way, because I don't think we should enslave people. And there are some people who've argued that, oh no, Rome's so inclusive with the citizenship. Nah, this ain't it. However, in other city-states, you had to have grandfathers on both sides who had been citizens of that place in order to have citizenship. There wasn't an easy way for immigrants to become naturalized and to gain rights comparable or equal to those of people who were born into the society. Rome is unusual in that it does have such a process, and you don't necessarily have to be enslaved for this either. If a Roman head of household sponsors you, they say, like, hey, this is Xenophon. He's my doctor. He's really cool. He saved me from a gallbladder attack. I think we should make him a citizen. I'm going to sponsor him. Xenophon might become a citizen that way, and that's perfectly fine. And then Xenophon's kids in the future are Roman citizens. One of the things Romans start doing politically during this period is, if you're a state that Rome considers friendly, you are willing to play ball with Rome on the political stage. You're making mutual defense treaties with each other. Rome likes you. You tolerate Rome. Then one of the perks they will give you is be like, hey, we're going to give you Roman citizenship, King so-and-so. And usually King so-and-so is like, thanks, I guess. Okay. But this means that some people were Roman citizens that might surprise you. For instance, Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Ptolemaic Egypt, very likely had Roman citizenship. Her father had it, and it's hereditary, so that's why. Mithridates did not have Roman citizenship. Maybe he's jealous. Now, Rome is not the only culture with a sponsorship citizenship process. We think Carthage had one too. I haven't mentioned Carthage yet, in part because Carthaginian science did exist, but there is this series of wars where Rome deletes them from the map, and this means our information's a little sketchy there. So let's see, we've talked a bit about, we briefly discussed slavery, but we do need to talk some about how enslavement and citizenship maps onto Roman expansion, because one of the most regular ways to become enslaved by a Roman is if Rome conquers the place you live in. You are taken as a prisoner of war, as part of an enemy faction, even women and children, it doesn't matter. If you were part of a war against Rome, then you are fair game to be captured, and then as part of the war reparations, Romans will enslave you, sell you, and then bring you back to Italy, and you'll be part of the labor force. A lot of these folks end up spending most of their lives working in agricultural zones or industrial zones. Most of them probably did not survive to be manumitted, but a lot of them did. And the next generation of Romans is made up of people who are descendants of free Romans and descendants of enslaved people who are naturalized Roman citizens. Especially because the city of Rome itself is deeply endemically malarial, disease rates in the city of Rome were very high. And what we see from looking at the genetics of bodies that we found from the period of the Roman Republic and Empire is that by the time we get to our historical period, the period we'll be discussing in this class, 200 BCE into 200 CE, most of the people living in Rome going by Roman as their identity marker were the descendants of people who had been brought from outside of Italy. So when we imagine a Roman, we're not imagining somebody whose family has been in Italy for many, many generations if they're in this city. It was enough to make Rome a very demographically distinctive region. If you end up in ancient Rome, bring mosquito nets, is my other bit of advice. It's not safe. So let's see, we've talked a little bit about patronage. Okay, so provincial administration is an impact of Rome's rapid expansion from a central Italian city-state to a city-state running multiple overseas territories in the Republic. So Rome is an empire, little e empire, before it has an emperor. There's about 150 years or so of lag before there's an emperor in charge of the Roman Empire. It's still an empire, though. An empire happens when one group of people is administering, profiting from, and in direct control of a territory that was not historically theirs. So, as Rome gets these territories and is sending governors to manage them, one of the things that they're doing is recruiting scientists, bringing them into their entourage, and then bringing them back to Rome. And we end up in situations where there are multiple upper-class Roman citizens because there is no emperor yet. Each one of them can have a pet scientist, and then their pet scientists are competing with each other over science stuff, which must have made things like super awkward for Roman scientists. I really hope they're okay. Okay, so here I'm going to give you some discussion questions to think about as you're doing the next bits of reading, because they can be a little bit all over the place. So Cato on agriculture is the first of the two readings in this unit. This is our oldest Roman author. He's writing in Latin in the mid-100s BCE, and his work is about how to manage a large agribusiness. Villa is the word in Latin. I think plantation gets a little bit closer to what we're talking about here. Most of the people working in this place are enslaved, and the assumption is that the advice is for the enslaver who is living remotely and managing the farm from a distance. So do take care when reading, because this is partly enslaver advice. But also, he talks a bit about different sorts of healthcare interventions that you should do in order to manage the health of people living on your property. And that's what we're reading for in the course of this course. Because this represents a stage of medicine before Romans had access to texts in the Hippocratic corpus or a lot of Greek-speaking physicians. Cato, however, did study abroad in Athens in his youth, so he knows about Greeks, he's met Greeks, he reads Greeks, he's aware. So this isn't by any means pure Roman medicine, but it does give us a bit of a snapshot of what local Italian medicine may have looked like before Romans buy into this concept that medicine as practiced by Greek intellectuals is the kind of medicine that we're going to consider most legitimate, our preferred method of thinking about health and healthcare. So let's see, some of these questions are aimed at making sure you don't miss some of the best advice. There is his cure for chub rub. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you'll know it when you see it. It is, it's delightful. So we do have an ancient bust that's sometimes identified as Cato the Elder, but we don't know. It's just an old Roman without a name that may or may not be Cato the Elder. So instead, I've given you pictures of my cat, Cato. Also not Cato the Elder, but he's my kitty. And he's very cute. And he was feral when I got him, so here he is on my lap. He's just, yeah, he's so much less problematic. Here are more of his baby pictures. So he has an anxiety disorder, and sometimes he needs to wear a little shirt for the compression. So I just want to introduce you to my little.
Where did you find him?
I have a friend in Baltimore who does cat rescue, and
Okay.
he was. I was like, yeah, who's your least adoptable? And she showed me this picture and was like, oh, he's so sad. I want that one.
How is that the least adoptable?
I don't know. I feel like she was holding out on me,
Yeah, seriously.
but he was like, he hid for the first 2 weeks. We saw nothing of him. And also there are prejudices against hypermelanated black cats, which he is. Like, all of his whiskers are pure black, no white furs anywhere. He is,
Wow.
yeah. So he's special. I love him. He's my little guy.
Does he like cabbage?
He does. He actually does.
That's so
I've
funny.
caught him like crunching on my salad, so he eats cabbage. Yes, and he's also very huffy. Like he'll go. I love him, and yeah. So at any rate, I may have named him Cato specifically, so I had an excuse to show pictures of him. But our cats are all named after like ancient people. There is also Tethys, as in the primordial sea goddess, and Juba for Juba II of Mauritania, Nerd King. We're going to talk about Juba II later. Juba II is really like, oh, why the hell not? Okay. Well, okay, short version of Juba II. So Juba II, when he was a baby, like under the age of 1, because he couldn't talk yet, he was kidnapped in a Roman campaign where his parents were murdered, and he had to be carried through a Roman triumph. However, they didn't kill him. He was raised in the household of the Emperor Augustus, where he met another prisoner of war who had also had to live through a triumphal procession, and that is Cleopatra VII's daughter with Mark Antony, Cleopatra Selene. They got married, and because they'd grown up in the emperor's household, they were trusted with their own kingdom, which is ancient Mauritania, like Morocco with a little bit of extra real estate. What they did with this power and this trust on behalf of the Roman emperor was they made a safe space for intellectuals fleeing Egypt, which was now under Roman control and wasn't safe for people who had been part of the Ptolemaic court. And he invited them to come to his court. He was an ecologist and a geographer, and he used a lot of his state budgets to fund expeditions to map the origins of the Nile and the inner geography of northwestern Africa. He was a recognized authority on elephants, and he spent almost all of his free time publishing respected ecological scientific treatises. His wife, Cleopatra Selene, was also a really smart cookie and a scientist in her own right. And they seem to have run their country as a place where people who didn't want to live under Rome could be safe. And their son inherited, he didn't live that long. They named him Ptolemy. So Juba II is a rare example of somebody who finds a way to peacefully resist imperialist overreach, and also huge nerd. So that's my other cat. He is just darling. Okay, so not quite so darling. Greek medicine's entry to the city of Rome was a little bit rocky. And this slide will hit the main highlights of that rocky relationship. Beginning in 219 BCE. So this is long before Mithridates and Asclepiades of Bithynia. We're going back a little bit. So 219, this is during the Second Punic War. Rome, looking at all of the other Greek city-states, realizes that, hey, they are paying doctors to move to their cities. You may remember Dr. Agathon from our exercise where we were analyzing what was going on with Hippocratic epidemics. So Rome decided, okay, yeah, they're getting doctors to move to their cities. We're going to do that too. So they invite this guy named Archagathus, who was born in Sparta. So Archagathus of Sparta is Rome's first pick to be their first official state doctor. And they do some extra. They pay for his clinic and his clinic setup, and they make sure that he's got downtown Rome street front property. And we think his job was to treat perhaps at reduced cost Romans, but he was a medical researcher in his own right. We have surviving in other medical texts some of his surgical procedures, and they seem to be very good, sensible surgical procedures. He was a pretty good surgeon, as far as we can tell, adjusted for time and space. However, Archagathus was practicing in a society that had trust issues with Greek people, probably because they were at war with most of the Greek-speaking world at the time. The Second Punic War overlaps with the First Macedonian War, which is a war where Corinth, Athens, Sparta, lots of mainland Greece is involved. This is not a recipe for trust in healthcare, and Roman patients began to have concerns about Archagathus. Concerns that they expressed in the very classy form of a nasty nickname, which was Carnifex. Carnifex means two things in Latin, butcher, and also murderer. So, not a great nickname. At any rate, Archagathus, the butcher, gets kicked out of Rome. I think he's fine. I hope he's fine. Probably he was just being a surgeon. Being a surgeon before germ theory is a hard row to hoe. Things are not going to go well for you. And poor buddy, I'm so concerned for him. That was a really weird choice on Rome's part. Anyway, this seems to have scarred the state of Rome so badly that not only do they kick him out, but they're like, no, this idea of the state physician is completely messed up. We're not doing this. It's got to be a Greek thing. We're not going to do it. Not only that, but in subsequent years, so 161 and 91 BCE are the two that we have the year for, but these seem to be flashpoints in an ongoing atmosphere of hostility. The Roman Senate voted to forcibly expel every Greek intellectual, especially doctors, from the city of Rome and surrounding Italian countryside. How well that worked is up for debate, but the fact that the Senate felt called to ban doctors from Rome and also to conflate Greek and doctor is a choice. It's a choice. So it is probably with trepidation that Asclepiades of Bithynia received his recruitment letter from the Roman state as we move into the years 129 to 40. So Asclepiades was born around 129. We think this invitation to move to Rome happens in the 90s to 80s. Again, this timeline is by no means secure, but this is within years of the last time the Senate tried to kick all Greek intellectuals out of Rome. Asclepiades of Bithynia spoke Greek. He wrote in Greek. He identified as Greek. He's Greek. And he chooses to move to Rome, which is an interesting choice that works out for him really well, though, because although Rome did not trust Greek-speaking physicians, they really hated Mithridates of Pontus. And making Mithridates of Pontus look stupid was worth more to them than not hiring a Greek. So that's an interesting would you rather. Contributing to Asclepiades' success where Archagathus failed is that his idea of how bodies work and his therapeutic methods based off of this model were less invasive and less dramatic than what Archagathus seems to be doing. He was not a surgeon, and he had this idea about gentle, minimalistic interventions that seems to have hit the Roman public at the right time and in the right way that they felt, yeah, okay, this guy's probably all right. He stays in Rome for the rest of his life, and he has a series of students who maybe improve. Improvement is relative. They continue to modify his ideas and his rules, and eventually this becomes a school or a sect of medicine called the Methodist sect, which we'll get to on the next slide. So by the end of this lecture, we have three different kinds of different kinds of doctors you might run into: dogmatic, empiricist, and now Methodists. So, what are the Methodists? They have nothing to do with John Wesley, much to my great aunt's disappointment. Rather, it's the same word, though, that gives us Methodist, the Christian denomination, and Methodist, the School of Medicine. Both of them are from the Greek word meth hodos. So a hodos is a road. Meta means on. So if you're methodos, you're on the road, you're on the map. It's a roadway to health, a roadmap to healing. And that makes sense. Also, we get the word method from this. A method is a roadmap to doing whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's, I don't know, the electric slide or your science fair. Okay. This theory of how the body works is doing its darndest to be as different from existing theories as possible. So it leaves the question of hidden causes versus evident causes and humors which ones where how to the side, and instead focuses on the movement of substances through the body. So we're viewing the body as a system of passageways and pores that can either move matter a little too quickly or too slow, or you can be in a mixed state where some parts of you are constricted, you're stuffy up, and then other bits of you have too much flow, have too much flux. They view the body then as the system for managing the motion of particles through pores. So the word poros, that gives us pores in English, doesn't just mean like the round opening in your skin that you're trying to unclog when you have an acne attack. Pore is the entire tube attached to the opening. So your digestive tract is a series of tubes. Those are poroi, those are passageways, pores, openings. Likewise, your blood vessels, those are pores, passageways. And then they theorize that there are smaller, too small to be seen passages also in the body that fluids move through. Now, this doesn't mean that we believe humors don't exist. Sometimes the particles moving through you are made up of different humors, but they're less concerned about what humors are where and how well they're mixed. And they're more concerned about how well is stuff moving through the system, where is it blocked, where is it going too fast, and how can we balance out the system. It's a very plumber sort of way of looking at the body. So in this way of looking at the body, they're very concerned with what they call the koinotes, or the common states. And these are shared features that all diseases have. These are the ideas of flux and constriction, that some diseases are diseases where you're dripping too much, and some diseases are diseases where you're stuffed up. And some diseases, you're stuffed up in this part and you're constricted in this part. So that's a mixed condition. So sometimes you'll hear these called the commonalities or the koinotes. Let's see. No, it is not spelling it. Koinetes. Koinotes. Ah! Yes, great. It spelled it right that time. In this way of treating the body, they focus on intervening as gently as possible, as early as possible, and avoiding dramatic treatments unless you've got a dramatic disease. To that end, they spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, like, is this a chronic illness? Is this an illness that's happening over time and developing slowly? Or is this an acute disease? Is this a thing that came on really fast? Because then we're going to have to step up our treatment a little bit faster. So we're looking to the disease for cues about pacing. They also believed that a cure does not need to be unpleasant to be effective, which for the time is a pretty dramatic claim. This is coming from existing models of medicine where starving your patients, making your patients convulsively throw up and have diarrhea, all in a day's work. So the idea that a treatment doesn't necessarily have to hurt to be effective is a little bit wild, a little bit different, and makes a lot of sense if you've got some very concerned Romans who are worried that you're trying to kill them. This includes one of my favorite concepts in the history of therapy, and this is passive exercise. Passive exercise is what it sounds like. So this is where you jiggle the body around without making the patient do anything. So you put the patient in a hammock, and you just sort of swing the patient in the hammock. And the swinging of the patient in the hammock makes bits of the patients that are constricted relax, and bits that are flowing too much kind of equalize. So it's a little bit like, when you shake a bottle to try to get bubbles to settle down, I guess, only you're doing it to your patient. So you might have a doctor telling you to get in that hammock and make somebody push you. That's passive exercise. Other passive exercises, taking a road trip, getting in a cart and having the cart pull you around. That also shakes your body and you're not doing anything. There's also light exercise. Things that we don't think of as exercise count as exercise for Methodist physicians. For instance, reading aloud counts as exercise. So if you want to work out, one of your workout options in ancient Rome is to pick up a book and read it out loud. This is still, by the way, if you're asthmatic, try it. It's a really great way to work on your breathing without feeling like you're being tortured by in the thing with the ball in it that you have to maybe it's just me. I'm bored easily. So reading out loud can be really good for your breath control, your lung capacity, and your overall lung function. So they're not wrong about the reading out loud. Often reading out loud while kind of pacing while you're reading aloud, which as an inveterate pacer, I understand, I kind of get it. So if you find yourself trying to work exercise into your day, but you still need to do your homework, may I suggest dabbling a little bit in some light, almost passive exercise. Read aloud to yourself and kind of walk around in circles. Your roommate will love it. So drugs and surgery are on the menu, but they're considered last resorts. If we have to go to drugs, it's because the disease is outpacing us. Similarly, surgery, sometimes it's appropriate, but we want to be very careful when we step up to that level. Methodism as a word and as a concept, its early beginnings are in the teachings of Asclepiades of Bithynia, but it doesn't really get its name and its brand recognition until the end of the 1st century BCE in Rome. And really the 1st century CE is when it starts getting super popular. It's popularized by Themison of Laodicea, who is, it's on the other slide, here he is. There he is, yeah. So he's one of Asclepiades' students, and it was an incredibly popular way of doing healthcare. However, it was also a very popular way of doing healthcare, which meant that people who are not Methodist authors went out of their way to trash it. Unfortunately, a lot of those authors have been our surviving texts. Galen is who I'm talking about. This is me talking about Galen. He's coming next. Like the heat death of the universe and the inevitable end of mankind. Anyway, not to prejudice you against Galen, he has his good points, but he was competing against a lot of Methodists for the same patients who thought Methodists were the bomb, and a good bomb, not like I'm going to kill you bomb. This meant that when Galen talks about Methodists, he is not being his best self, and he is not necessarily telling us reliable information about the Methodists. It's unfortunate because although Methodists published a lot of science and healthcare science, not a lot of their texts have survived because later generations would see, oh, he's a Methodist. This must be shit. Galen said so. There's an exception, and that is Cyrannus of Ephesus. So when we get to obstetrics and gynecology, we will be reading a book by a Methodist physician, and he is, not unproblematic, but I'm fond of him for reasons. Okay, so it's not as far as I thought we'd get, but it's as far as we got. Be well, stay classy. I'm going to Sicily for the next week, so if you don't hear from me, it's not that I don't love you. Also, I think our next quiz due date is coming up. Yes. Yeah. So again, if you ask me for an extension, I will say yes. Just assume I say yes. Okay. Take care, my guys.
You're safe, Professor. Thank you.
You too. Take care, guys. All right.
I'm going to ask you once they have the attendance.
Oh, yes. Oh, shit. And I didn't. That is on me. Okay. Alternative. Let me run by you the discussion exercises we've done so far, and you tell me which ones don't look familiar, and those are probably the ones you need to do. Okay. So let me turn off the recording because other people don't need to see this conversation.